name is Chi. I'm a senior at Santa Clara. I am also a student inclusion educator with the Office for Multicultural Learning, which basically means that I am a student worker who works and plans events for students. So we do stuff like digital dialogues where we talk about social justice issues that we're personally passionate about. And we can also do like pretty much anything we want. So that's why I got this idea to interview you for this project.
Awesome. Love that.
Yeah. So if you would introduce yourself, just for context, that would be cool.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Kai Harris, and I'm an assistant professor of creative writing here at Santa Clara University.
Cool. So one of the things I was actually really curious about, because we have a class together, and so that's how I found this like nice segue into being able to interview you. Like obviously I could have sent you an email randomly, but it was less random because I had you. So I was really wondering how long you've been at SCU?
Yeah, I just started here in the fall, so yeah, not too long.
Oh wow, that's so cool. I think I actually ran into your husband the other week.
Yeah, you did. You did. He told me all about it. He said he like dropped into OML just to say hi to folks and found out that you were my student. And he said you were really excited. And I asked him, you know, did it seem like she likes me? And he said, yeah. So that was good news.
I do. To remove any doubt from your mind, I definitely do. I really enjoy our class so far. For anyone who's listening who doesn't know, I am in Dr. Harris's fiction writing class. Definitely recommend. I love it. Take it for your arts core, take it for fun. And so this is your second quarter then. And so how are you liking it so far here at Santa Clara?
It's been great. You know, I always say that like this has kind of been a weird time to start a new, you know, to have this many life transitions. Like my family and I moved from Michigan to come here. So that was already like a huge thing by itself, but also like moving during a pandemic, starting here during the pandemic, switching between teaching virtually, teaching in person, teaching hybrid. All of those things have definitely come with challenges, but I love being here. Obviously, the weather is great. Coming from Michigan, this is a big shift. But I love the English department. Everyone has made me feel so welcome since I've started, and I love my students. I've had the opportunity to work with amazing students like you, and teach the stuff I love to teach. So it's been really great so far.
Oh, I definitely do agree with that. Like my favorite part about Santa Clara is not only the weather, because obviously that's a given, but the faculty. Like, gosh, all of my professors have been just so amazing, and that's one of the memories that I'm definitely gonna cherish. Because I'm graduating early. Like,
oh, awesome.
Yeah, so I'm like, oh, please, I want more time. So I totally get it. Like having your first kind of like experience teaching or moving being virtual is so wild. Like so sure. I totally get that. Like having pretty much my entire like university experience be virtual and like my last quarter be semi-virtual has been really interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. And so a segue from that is how have you been 1 week after your book launch, like with the whole virtual aspect and like hybrid aspect?
Yeah, wow. It's funny because when you just said that, I realized that it's been 1 week. It feels like it's been like either like 30 seconds or 30 years. It's been a very wild ride so far. It's been really great though. There's been such great reception for the book, and it just makes me feel so good. And I'm just trying to enjoy the ride at this point. So I'm feeling good.
Nice. Yeah. Like I feel like this is one of those things where the train has left the station and like wherever it is now, it is on its way.
Exactly. So, it's outside of my control. So I'm just riding,
Just enjoying the wind, enjoying the breeze. Yeah, it's been 1 week. That is so wild. I can't imagine too many things have changed in a week other than maybe people getting started on the book. So, I mean, that is obviously just a good thing. So congratulations, man. That is so exciting.
Yeah, so yeah, people have started reading. Some people have finished reading the book. Lots of people have tagged me in posts and let me know that they read the book in a day or two, which is amazing.
Whoa,
Yeah, so
that is
it's
definitely
been awesome.
that is so cool. Oh, that's so awesome. Wow. So let's get into some of your background, like in terms of writing. I'm curious as to know how you got into writing in the first place.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's always complicated for me to answer because I don't exactly remember like the moment. I
Um,
was always writing something. Like I started out when I was a kid, just like writing poetry. And unless my memory made this up, I think at some point I like got a poem published. And I was like a really little kid in some like anthology of kids poetry.
Whoa.
Just like loving that feeling and being like, oh my gosh, this is so dope. My words are like in a book. And so I think that at that point I kind of had the itch, you know.
Whoa.
But I did get into fiction for a while. I was writing poetry a lot as a kid, and then I got into playwriting. And so I really
Cool.
loved writing plays and was like writing plays like for my church. I was, really into church and like wanted to write these like epic church plays. So I was into that for a minute. And then I got into screenwriting and I thought that that was
Oh,
like it. And I was like, this is a career for me. I really wanted to be a screenwriter because I love film. And I did film school for a couple of years and worked a couple film sets. And then I was like, it just still isn't exactly right for me. But I knew that I was going to be a writer. I was just trying to land on like what that would look like. And so fiction writing was actually the last like kind of writing that I got into. And
oh,
then
interesting.
and then it was the one that stuck.
Wow, that is so interesting. I've personally never like really dabbled in other versions of fiction. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
do write for fun, just like as an outlet, not really journaling, but just like fiction. And so I've always just stuck with like just basic fiction writing and like a very
Yeah.
specific genre of it too, like mild fantasy fiction writing. Um,
Yeah.
so that is so interesting, like how you managed to transition from poetry and you went to school for screenwriting. So like that was pretty serious. Like you were actually involved and invested in that medium.
Yeah, I was pretty into it. It's super fun, and honestly, dream board. I would love to still write a film one day, and maybe I'll be lucky enough to write a film based on one of my books.
Ooh,
That would be the dream. But yeah, I love just trying new forms of writing, and I recommend it to everyone. Just have fun with it.
yeah, definitely. Oh, that would be so cool. Um, I think it's like worthwhile. It's like, artists using different like paints or something like or using
Right.
oils or charcoal. Like it influences the way you share your story. So I guess that
Absolutely.
kind of does answer my next question, which was how long you've been writing for. It's so cool that you've been writing since you were a kid. So it's like I feel like
Yeah.
everybody writes, but if you don't write with intention, you don't really grow. So it's really cool that you've
Mm,
been like creating since you were a child. And so
yeah.
that kind of there's not really a good segue for this, but this is kind of like the major question that I'm sure you've had already. But what is the world of publishing like for a Black woman?
That is a big question.
Yeah.
you know, I, I can't speak for everyone's experience. My journey, I think, is has been really amazing in ways that I know that the journey hasn't been for other Black women. So I want to point that out up front. I've been really lucky to work with the folks that I work with. I think that one of the big challenges of being a Black woman in publishing is just wanting to stay true to your voice and your vision. And
Mhm.
sometimes that's not possible in this industry. And so, for me, I say that I've been lucky because I signed with an agent who's also a woman of color who I, didn't have to explain to her why it was important for me to maintain my voice and my vision. She already knew. And
Right.
so that was a big part of it for me is working with an agent who believes in me and believes in my voice exactly as it is and didn't feel the need to change anything to make it more marketable or,
Mhm.
more
Yeah.
palatable or what have you. So that was dope already to begin with.
Let's
And then
go.
we signed with, we ended up selling the book to Tiny Reparations Books, which is an imprint of King and Random House that's led by Phoebe Robinson. from Two Dope Queens, actress, comedian, author, etc. Phoebe is dope, as you would expect.
Yep.
And she, again, has from the very beginning just believed in my voice and wanted nothing else but to champion my voice exactly as it is.
Oh,
So that's it's honestly been a dream come true, because when I was going into publishing, it was one of my fears. I was worried that, some people were giving me warnings and horror stories. And I just kept wanting to think, that doesn't have to be my experience. I don't have to sell out. I don't have to compromise who I am or what I want to say to put my book out in the world. And I just really believed in that. And I think that, I know that I'm proof that it's possible. It's not possible in every situation, but I do think it's important to fight for what matters to you. And for me, I really want to tell stories of Black girls and Black women that are authentic, that are unfiltered, that are honest. And I wasn't going to let go of that no matter what, even if it meant that I wasn't going to ever, traditionally publish this book. That was fine with me, because I knew the story I wanted to tell, and I couldn't compromise that.
Yeah, I think that is definitely 100% really valuable. And once it's in the store, it's next to all those other books published by all those other people. So whoever's picking up your book deserves to hear your story. And I think that's so important that you're here and that you made that, because similarly, I have kind of a similar experience being a woman in STEM, and not just a woman in STEM, but a woman of color in STEM. Right. So you hear all these horror stories, and I'm like, oh, what does that mean for me and my career? But I have also enjoyed the privilege of being at Santa Clara and having female faculty and women of color who are faculty who are supporting me, or my mentors. Yeah. And so I think it's important to find people who understand you unquestionably.
Absolutely.
And get where you're coming from, because some people just won't get it. Yeah. It's hard to explain, but I totally understand that.
Yeah, we get each other.
Yes, for sure. And so this kind of answers your next question a little bit, but I wanted to get into the specifics of what the Fireflies knew. So how did that look for you? What did the journey to getting what the Fireflies knew published look like in terms of writing it, or the creation?
So the book started out as a short story that I wrote during my master's program when I was living in Nashville, Tennessee. And so this was probably 2014 or 2015 when I wrote the original story. And it was very different. It was, I believe the character was the same, but she wasn't the same. She had the same name. But at that point, I was kind of just really basing the character off of myself, because I was I think I was writing based on a prompt, honestly, and I was supposed to be exploring place or memory of place. Actually, this is an assignment that I've had you do before. Pretty similar assignment. So I was, but it wasn't. We're doing Flash in our class right now, and this was just traditional short stories. So I wrote this story, and it contained two of the scenes that still exist in the book.
That is so cool.
Yeah. The very first scene that I wrote was the Firefly scene, which later I think we'll talk about, because it inspired the title of the book. And then there's a scene where Katie looks for caterpillars with her older sister, Nia, and that scene was in the original story. So I wrote this story, and I liked it, and I was interested in it, and other people were workshopping it, and they were interested in it, and people kept saying, there's so much here, you could, really turn this into a whole book. And at the time, I wasn't really interested in writing a book. And if I was going to write a book, I was for whatever reason, not going to write that book. So I tried to start writing a different book, and I noticed that every time I tried to write longer projects, I was just not finishing them. I would get to a certain point and then kind of just fall off the project. And I didn't know why, but I think that ultimately it had to do with the fact that at that point, I was writing these books that I thought I was supposed to write. I was writing about characters who I thought I was supposed to write about. So, mostly white characters. And I was like writing stuff that I didn't really know. And that was why I would like fizzle out at some point, because like it was hard for me to keep it going, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
So at some point I was like, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to try to turn this story into a book. And so I started working on it. And at first, the same thing happened where I just reached a point where I wasn't writing anymore, and I was kind of fading on the project. And so I was like, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to query an agent, right? Because I knew I wanted to. Ultimately, I knew I wanted to traditionally publish, and I started getting super excited about, traditional publishing. I was like researching everything. And I was like, oh, okay. So like, this is what you have to do to get an agent. Okay, I'm going to start doing that. So like the first thing you have to do once you like find an agent that you like, you have to send them a query letter where you, they'll ask you for specific things. It might be that they want you to send a synopsis of the book and like some sample chapters. So I found this agent that was interesting to me. And so I, queried her and I sent her this stuff over. And to me, I was thinking like, all right, I'm going to do this as a way to like jumpstart myself, to like make it feel real so that I'll go ahead and finish writing this book. So what ended up happening was the agent loved the sample chapters I sent over. And she was like, well, it could have been awesome. She was like, will you send over the full manuscript? And so what I didn't realize is that when you query an agent, you're supposed to have the whole book already written. And I didn't, obviously. I had like maybe 2 or 3 chapters written. And so I decided to, do the right, the thing that probably everybody would do in this situation. And I was like, I'll just write the book real fast.
Like, I guess I'll just write it.
Now I'm gonna write it.
When my essays due, like at midnight, I guess I'll just write it right now.
That was the exact energy. And, and honestly, I was like that in college. I would, I could write essays like that, with no trouble. So I was like, I'm gonna just write it real fast. So, and I did. I wrote it real fast, and I wrote it in less than a month because I think that this I sent the email out maybe like December 6th. And then by like December 31st, I had finished the book, and I sent it over to the agent who, up until that point, I just completely ghosted. Like I never responded to her email. And then I just wrote back to her like almost a month later as if no time had passed. And I was just like, hello, as requested, please find the full manuscript attached.
Yep. Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah. So, but anyways, ultimately she passed, and because, at that point I had ghosted her for a while, and the book wasn't that great because it was just my first draft. So I spent years after that revising it, getting it ready. This entailed me like reading a lot, writing a lot, revising a lot, workshopping a lot, making a ton of connections. Like those were the main things I was doing over that like 3-year span of time. And those are the things that led me to be able to ultimately sign with an agent in 2019. And so then once I signed with her, we had to revise everything all over again for probably another year or so before we ended up submitting it and selling it to Time Preparation.
Wow, what a journey. That is so I feel like that origin story is something you would never hear in real life. It would be like, I don't know, like a short story, like a flash fiction piece where this kind of scenario happens.
Yeah.
So like interesting. I can't imagine that happening because it feels so like out of this world. But that's kind of like one of those vibes where your older sibling or whatever goes through this experience and then tells you all the secrets, like, hey, before you send a query, make sure your story is finished.
Yeah, I know, right? That's something I'm telling everybody now.
Make sure it's done in case they ask. And so you said the original story was a short story. So like in terms of like word count, if you even remember, how much did you have to add?
Oh, so much. I mean, I think the original draft of this book was, it was shorter. It was maybe 60,000 words, maybe.
Okay.
I think at the point that it was a short story, I mean, when it was a short story, it was very short. It was maybe like 7 to 10 pages. And then by the time I queried the agent, I had like, I think the first few chapters. So yeah, I mean, maybe the first 2. So I maybe had, let's say 20, 30 pages written when I queried her. And then by the time I turned it in, the last time it was 160 or so pages. So.
Jeez, nice.
It's a big difference.
Yeah, you got to work. Like, dang, you sat down. Wow, that's so cool. That's really awesome. So it sounds like you spent a lot of time revising, and obviously we learned about the importance of that in class because part of writing is not just like the creation of it, but the revision of it.
Yep.
And so do you have anything to say about that process? Like what part of revision works for you?
Oh man. So I've grown to like really love revision.
Okay.
Honestly, I think that it's maybe my favorite part of the process now that I think I have more of a system for it. But at first it was just like extremely chaotic and stressful.
Oh God.
Because I like, I sat down with this whole book and I was like, how am I supposed to revise a whole book? Because,
Yeah.
it's like dominoes. Any change you make is going to affect all of these things elsewhere.
Right.
And I wasn't realizing that at first. So I would just like make a change and then not notice how it had set off something somewhere else.
Ooh.
So it took me a while to get into the rhythm of like how I revise. And I say this to y'all in class all of the time, but it was really just this process of me having to like figure out how I do it best, like what works for me when it comes to revision. Because I was hearing all these writers say like, here are the ways that I revise. And like, they sound really cool. You'll like hear what someone else does and you're like, oh, that sounds great. I'm going to do it just like that. But then when you sit down and try to do it like that, it maybe doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
So I found out like some things that work for me. Like, first of all, I have to have a physical copy. Like I can't revise on my laptop because when I'm on my laptop, I'm drafting. I don't know. It's just a different mindset.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
to step into the space of like a reader, somebody who's like taking this thing in, I need it to look different than it looked when I was writing it. So I'll usually print out my drafts and put it in a binder. And then I'll read the whole thing that way. And I'll try to like read it the first time and not make too many marks, but I will, I have like a little highlighter color code system thing. And if there's something I absolutely love, I'll highlight it a certain color. If there's a place where as I'm reading, something's off or confusing, I'll just like highlight it, my confusing color. So I'll do things like that right away. And then I'll go back and read it again and start to make notes for myself. And then I'll go back and read it again and actually start to like cross things out and write things in. So it's like a pretty long process. I've also gotten in the habit recently of like using Kindle. So you can like email your documents to your Kindle email address, and then you can read the doc like it's like a book in your Kindle.
Oh, that's so cool.
Also, yes, that's also been super helpful as a way for me to like just engage with it differently. So yeah, revision is like, it's such a long process, but now I've like kind of figured it out. I use some tools, like I use Trello a lot for revision. I have Trello boards for like all of the things that I write where I keep track of like, this is the part about the dominoes. I use like Trello boards to, keep track of where everything ties together so that I know that if I make a change here, this scene is also tagged that way. So like I have to go to all the tagged scenes and change whatever. And I also sometimes just like go super old school and I'll just like use a big poster board and a bunch of like, colored index cards. And like each card might represent a different plot point or a different character arc. And then I'll, just literally lay everything out all over my floor and start moving stuff around and piecing stuff together. So I have some different things that I do. It depends on like how the revision is going, what the project is, and that sort of thing. But it's honestly my favorite part now because that's where like the magic happens,
Oh, yeah.
That's where like the words actually turn into a story or a book.
Yeah. Oh, like ever since I've been stuck on the image of like the index cards because I'm just imagining that meme where the dude, like the conspiracy theory guy, like the red string.
Yeah.
It's so cool. I've never thought about using index cards. I do know someone who, when they write, she prints out her entire like book or whatever she's writing, and then she like goes over it in a red pen. And I'm like, oh my God, that is so much work. But it sounds like that's a really common technique. I guess the most important thing that you seem to be saying is it needs to look different, in a different form, so then your eyes can kind of like look at it again.
That helps me. But I think some people can like look at it on their computer screen and just start revising. So
that's something I kind of do. But similarly, I have to like change the font. I can only write in Garamond. Like
I love Garamond. It's the best font in the world.
My best friend. Yep. Yeah. Like if I weren't in Garamond, I'd be in like Times New Roman, but I have such an academic kind of like vibe to that. I can't write anything for fun. Like my creativity is stifled on TNR.
You're so right. Yes, if I'm writing creatively, it's Garamond. Like if I do anything else, it just It just
Garamond
feels wrong.
is so nice.
Yeah.
It's my best friend. So then I would change it to like, I don't know, like Ariel or something really different.
Yeah.
Then it looks different. And so maybe
I love that. That's really cool.
I don't know. That's something that has worked with me in the past, but I don't really make a habit of revising just because like who does that when you're writing like essays and stuff for school? I just turn it in and I call it a day. I'm like, good luck, professor.
Oh my gosh. I'm so mad that you're telling me this right now.
Wait, we haven't even had our chance to do our workshop revisions yet. So I will.
Okay.
Yeah, I will. Don't worry. But in my previous classes, don't tell those professors.
Okay. Your secret's safe.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Revision is, I feel like, a really understated part of the writing process that people who maybe don't write don't get. And maybe even people who do write don't want to get. But it definitely is important.
Yeah. Right.
And so this is another really bad segue. But the next question I was wondering about was, so it's February, and as we know, it's Black History Month. And you've said you spent like years working on getting this like book together and like revising it. And so did you plan on your book release landing on the 1st of February in 2022?
Oh man, I wish I was that thoughtful. No, I didn't, but I work with a team of highly skilled professionals, and I think they planned for it. They're the ones who pick the date. And, I think that we were all excited for it to come out on the first day of Black History Month. That was a very special moment for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, stuff like this makes me feel like, I don't know, it kind of goes back to being like a woman in STEM, or like even because I identify as a lesbian. And so I've been like under the kind of guise of feeling like I've been tokenized. Like at school or like, wherever. And so I kind of always worry about things like this, where it's like, do you feel like you're being tokenized? Unless you're being authentically represented, then you do feel like you're celebrating. Like this week, I'm celebrating Lunar New Year with the Office of Multicultural Learning. And so having like my involvement in that and having my own foot in that makes me feel less like I'm tokenizing myself, being like a woman of color and celebrating my own, like, I guess, stuff. That's just really what I was curious about. Like, how did you feel about that? And if you're like authentically, like genuinely happy about it, because I think it's so cool for like non-Black people to be able to celebrate the month by like reading your book and hearing the story from like about a Black girl from a Black woman. Like that is so cool and important.
Yeah, I think what you said is so right, that it all depends on like where it's coming from. I was thrilled for the book to come out at this time because I know why my team made that decision. And I knew that like it stemmed from a place of like, this is going to be such a great moment. Like I think at first our launch date was going to be a bit later. And then they were like, we don't want you to miss out on the opportunity to be a part of these Black History Month conversations.
Right.
And I'm happy that they made that decision because I've loved being able to do this. I have this opportunity to speak with you, and I'm speaking at San Jose State University next week for Black History Month. And I did a Black History Month kickoff event with the African American Community Services Agency in San Jose. So it's been really wonderful to work with organizations to kind of have these conversations that are really coming from a place of authenticity for people wanting to like highlight the book and talk about the book in this context. That's been really amazing.
Oh, that's so awesome. That is so exciting. I'm really glad that you did say yes, because for the Office of Multicultural Learning, we're putting together things to also celebrate the month, like social media posts. One of my colleagues
saw them.
They look really good. I didn't make them. I didn't make mine yet, but I will next week. One of my colleagues is doing like a blacklist, like Obama's blacklists. And so she has like a list of novels. And so I like slid your novel in there. I was like,
I saw that.
You gotta represent.
Thank you. I saw that. That made me so happy.
Oh, I'm so glad that, that the timing of it worked out. Because for non-Black people, I guess they don't really know how to approach like Black conversations. Like I have a friend from overseas who is, she's Black and she's from New Zealand. And people are so afraid of saying the word Black that they call her African American, and she's literally not even American.
Yeah,
And so I think about that a lot, and I'm like, wow, that is a conversation we desperately need to have.
absolutely. Yeah.
Like what? She's not even American, and you're obsessed with calling her African American instead of Black. I don't know. That was like a turning point for me in my conversations about like BIPOC communities and being like a woman of color, but also being non-Black. Definitely
Yeah.
a turning point for me.
Yeah, it's all about education. And I think
Yeah.
at this point I just feel really honored to be like able to say stuff, to be able
Yeah.
to be trying to like build a platform to be able to talk about this. And for me it's like I write about Blackness, like period. That's what I'm writing about. I'm writing about the Black experience. I'm writing about Black girlhood and Black womanhood. I presume that that's probably always what I'm going to write about. And so, for me, it's very important that I'm wanting to show people to not shy away from this. Like, there's nothing wrong with like saying this is a Black writer who writes about Blackness. That's true. That's the reality, and that's perfectly great. So I think that education is super important, and just us having these kinds of conversations will hopefully make a difference.
Right, definitely. Yeah, I feel like that's the difference between like addressing like anti-racism versus kind of taking a neutral stance and being like colorblind, which is like as damaging almost as being actively racist.
Right.
And I think it's definitely so important. It is even something to celebrate. Like that is so cool that you're here and like your face is on the book and you're representing. And so that is a sneaky segue to my next question. Do you have any specific thoughts or feelings or intentions on representation in media?
For sure. Like I said, I really wanted to write this book that's about Black girlhood because, I think that it's so important for people to see themselves in literature. And, when I was growing up, it was rare for me to see characters that I felt like looked like me, were like me, had lives like mine. There weren't a ton of books that I was reading back then where, young Black girls were the main characters. And so I was like trying to find them, as hard as I could. My teacher in 5th grade introduced me to Maya Angelou. And that was also when I was like super into poetry.
Ooh.
And so that was probably one of my first literary influences. And then I, found out about Toni Morrison, and, I've been down that rabbit hole ever since. But, just like when I was a young kid, I didn't see myself a lot in literature. And I think that, as much as it's important for us to read about other experiences, because I definitely think that that's important too. We need to read about experiences that are unlike our own so that we can develop empathy, so that we can, start to understand other people's points of views and lived experiences. But it's also really important that we're seeing ourselves in literature. That helps us to feel validated, to feel, I thought for years that like something was wrong with my life because it didn't seem to look the same as like the lives of the people on the TV shows I watched and in the books that I read.
Definitely.
And, to feel on time to realize like there's nothing wrong with my life. And it's not that my life is so different than other people's lives. It's just that my life is not represented here. And so I wanted to be a part of making sure that happens. And, I said something I wrote in my acknowledgments for the book that like, I hope that reading this book will make someone begin to feel seen. And I hope that it will also allow someone else to begin to see, a new perspective. So yeah, I think it's very important.
Yeah. Oh, that's so insightful. That's very cool. I do have very, very similar feelings regarding this topic. I, as a student at Santa Clara, for context, I grew up in San Jose, California, and San Jose has the biggest population of Vietnamese people outside of Vietnam. But at Santa Clara, the demographics are like wildly different. And they don't even offer Vietnamese as like a foreign language. So I had to look for like a professor who understood enough Vietnamese to be able to proctor my like foreign language exam so I can test out of that. And so that was like a really alienating experience. I was like, this is so like weird and wacky. And I felt like I didn't really belong at Santa Clara, I guess. But my CF for my first year, my community facilitator, which is like an RA for non-Santa Clara people, she was my first CF ever, and she was a Black woman. And so having her in a space where it was supposed to be my home, made me feel like I was an important person. Like having a woman of color like older than me and still have like a mentorship role made me feel more at home, because like the rest of my floor, everyone was just white, just like white people. In my English class, my creative thinking and writing class, I was the only non-white person in the room, which was wild. Yeah, not just like the first Asian or the first Vietnamese, I was the only non-white person. And so that was an experience. I was like, oh Lord, what's going on? And so me being here, working with the Office for Multicultural Learning, and like I turned into a CF. And so just like being there for students who look like me or have similar life experiences to me is like so important, especially like in STEM. I'm like, what is going on in here? Like, oh, I don't know. Like I feel alienated in my major, but at the same time, I want to be there for people who are like me. I don't know. So many feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important.
Yeah. So I just wanted to let you know it means a lot that you're here and you're talking to me. And I
Thank
think
you.
it's important that we do have this conversation. And so
I agree.
Yeah. And so my next question has to do with still kind of like your background. You mentioned like Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou. And so and also films. So where do you draw inspiration from as a writer?
Wow, I feel like I draw inspiration from everywhere, honestly. Because I write really realistic fiction, I'm always just inspired by life and the world around me and like everyday things that happen in our lives. So, I keep a journal, and I also keep like a note in my notes app that's just like ideas. Cool. And so if I'm just like going through my regular day and something happens, and I'll think to myself, that would be super interesting. And sometimes it's like stuff that's going on with like my friends or my family or like in my own life. And I'll think like, that's something interesting. And usually the way that I write is like, I don't end up writing that thing as it is or as it was. Mm-hmm. I take things that I've seen or experienced or witnessed or whatnot, and then I imagine like possible what ifs to those things. And that's how I like fictionalize it. So, the book that I'm working on right now is based on something that happened when I was in high school. But what happened to me in high school doesn't happen in the book. Instead, I took what happened to me and I imagined like 2 really specific what ifs about that situation. Mm-hmm. And that was the basis for that book. So I'm just like, I'm just inspired by the world around me. But I also, of course, derive a lot of inspiration from, specifically Black women authors like Toni Morrison, Jasmine Ward, Zora Neale Hurston, writers, who have influenced like the ways that I look at voice and the ways that I look at, authenticity in dialogue and the ways that I look at setting and storytelling. So that's also been a huge influence.
Oh, that is so cool. It feels like to me, or it sounds like you have a lot of inspiration, like wells to draw from. So have you ever, or do you ever deal with writer's block?
Well, I try not to say this because I think it makes people mad when I say it, but I don't really deal with writer's block.
Oh, I'm mad.
But I think the reason why I don't is because of the way that I look at writing. Like I can always write, but it's because I've trained my body to do it. So I think I used to get writer's block back when I felt like, oh, I have to like wait for inspiration to strike and I have to like be creative to sit down and write something. I used to feel that way 100%. And that was why I was always turning in everything like at the last minute. Because for some reason, inspiration only struck when the deadline was like 3 hours away.
Yeah, the name of that inspiration is called Stressed Out.
Exactly. That used to be my cue to writer's block. But these days, I think that I try to keep a very regular writing habit. I try to write every day. And so far this year, I've written like every day except for, I think, 2 days. Mm-hmm. And it could be like anything. It doesn't mean that like I'm like sitting down and I'm like writing my next novel every single time I sit down to write. Sometimes I'm not feeling like that. And so I'll just work on a smaller project, or I'll just like journal a lot, or, what have you, but I'm writing all of the time. And so I've trained my body that like, okay, when I do these certain things, it's time to write. And so it's like I discovered this switch to like turn my creativity on. So I'm no longer like sitting around waiting for creativity to strike. I like know how to get it going. So that's probably the biggest difference. But there'll still be times when I'm like working on a specific project and I can't figure out like what to write next or how to move forward. So that still happens to me for sure. And when that happens, I usually rely on getting away from that project, working on something else, or else I'll like do writing exercises from the point of views of like my characters, or things like that. Usually when I end a writing session, I try to end with like the start to the next thing. So instead of like ending at the end of a scene, so then that would mean when I came back the next day, I'd have to figure out like, okay, what happens next? Now I have to like really brainstorm and figure out what happens next. Instead of stopping my writing session at the end of that last scene, I'll start writing the beginning of the next scene, and then I'll stop right in the middle of it. When I still know what's going to happen next, I'll stop right there. So then when I start my next writing session, I've already given myself something. I'm already able to jump back in and start writing because I'm right in the middle of something and I know how to finish it.
Right. Okay.
So then by doing that every day, it's like I'm always giving myself like breadcrumbs to like how to keep moving forward.
That's really cool. That actually makes so much sense. It sounds kind of like people who make a habit of like, I don't know, working out every morning. I'm always like, why, what world do you want to wake up before sunrise to run? And they're like, I just like it. Like you built this rhythm for yourself and your body like gets used to it and you find yourself like actually enjoying it. And so it's like that. So it's like your body is used to it, but you've actually like found joy in it. And I think that's so cool. That's so cool. I do suffer from writer's block, but I think it's for the same reason where it's like I don't have a habit of revising, so I'm too invested in my first draft.
Right.
So that definitely is good advice to take for sure.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get into some specific book questions about what the Fireflies knew. Do you have like on hand, if you don't, it's totally cool because the book's out and people can just Google it. People can use their Google, but do you have like a book blurb or anything that you usually share with people when you're talking about this novel?
Yeah, I mean, I can just go off the dome, off the top of my head, but
Ooh, okay.
A little freestyle here. So what the Fireflies knew is a coming of age novel. It's about a young girl named KB who is 10, going on 11 years old, who ends up at her grandfather's house in Lansing, Michigan, to spend the summer with him. And it's very unexpected. Her mother drops her and her older sister Nia off after the death of their father. And so KB is now spending this summer with her grandfather, who she doesn't really know, and her older sister, who is 14 going on 15 and not super interested in her younger sister anymore. But they're also both, navigating trauma and grief. And, so the book is about about this summer and how KB, she does a lot of just like regular kid things. She's, catching bugs and trying to make friends. But she's also, exploring family history. She's trying to understand what happened in her family, and she feels like she can try to fix things, and ultimately her journey is of her, working to kind of like mend family relationships. And, she wants to try to get back home to her mom.
Oh, that sounds so cute. I have yet to pick up a copy, but I've seen like the book description on like your publishing website and like on Amazon, and it sounds really like sad. So I'm like waiting for a weekend where I don't have anything and I just sit down and like just like cry about it. Like,
I feel terrible at the sheer amount of people who have told me that they cried.
Oh, good to know. Good to know.
I've been tagged in posts of people warning other people like, don't read this book in public because
literally.
You will get found out. You will cry. So it was not my intention, but I do think I'm a very I love emotions. I love exploring emotions. I love being in my emotions. So it's not any surprise to me that I've written an emotional book.
Oh, good to know. Yeah, I'll have like a water bottle or something so I can rehydrate. I'm like bracing myself. I'm ready. I'm a heavy crier.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I'm super stoked though. It'll be like cleansing. It'll be cool.
Yeah.
And so, what the Fireflies knew. So she's like catching bugs and stuff. And you mentioned that one of the scenes in this novel was from your short story. And so how does that like come around to give this book that title? Like, how did you come up with that title specifically?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, the scene there's a scene in the book where KB is catching fireflies with her granddaddy, and
Mhm.
that was one of the first scenes that I ever wrote back when this was a story. So, and it also happens to be one of my favorite scenes in the book, and I don't
Oh,
know if that's because it was like the OG scene, or like if it's something about the scene itself. I really love that scene because I wrote it kind of like based on my memory of catching fireflies in Lansing, my grandfather.
ooh.
And so it's like when I wrote it, I could see it. I felt like I was there again. So when I was trying to think of a title, I was immediately drawn to that scene.
Mhm.
And KB refers to fireflies in a couple different ways. So at first, she talks about fireflies as something big, or sorry, excuse me, something small that can create something really big. And at that time, it's because she's like, she's looking at these little bugs and she feels like they're like magic because they're so
Mhm.
small, but they're like lighting up the night, the night sky around her. And
Yeah.
so that's what she means when she says it then. Later in the book, she also talks about the same thing, but now the small thing, the fireflies, the big thing that they create is they're the first things that start to bring her and granddaddy closer together. So she's starting to
Oh,
see it like in a new way. So that was, the main inspiration. And then the new part of it, what the fireflies knew,
Mhm.
just refers to knowledge and truth and secrets. And, that's what KB is kind of questing for throughout the book.
Yeah, I think that is so cool. I am not really familiar with like fireflies as a symbol because we don't have them in California, but
Yeah,
that makes
it's
sense.
so
Like
terrible.
I know, I feel like I'm missing out on like a big part of like culture by not looking at fireflies and like
They're
really
really cool.
oh, like, but it makes sense because like they illuminate the night and such, and so the symbol
Yeah.
makes sense. It's just like, dang, I freaking wish I had fireflies here so I can better understand it and like use
You'll
it.
have to go see some for sure.
Ah, it definitely a life experience. Like a field of fireflies. That
Yeah.
is so cool. So on the topic of like names and titles, how did you come up with the main character's name? Like KB is such an interesting name.
How did I come up with that? So actually, don't let my sister hear this because this is
Ooh,
gonna just really, stoke her ego. But KB, her entire name is a play off of my sister's name.
oh,
So my sister's initials are KB,
mhm,
and KB actually stands for Kenyatta Bernice,
mhm.
which Kenyatta I just came up with, I think. Bernice is very similar to my sister's middle name, which is Bernice, which
Mm.
was my grandmother's name.
Aw.
So yeah, so Kenyatta Bernice was like, and then KB as a nickname was just really a riff off of my sister's name. I'm not really sure why.
Oh,
KB is not really anything like my sister. She's more
mhm.
like me than she's like my sister. But yeah, that's where it came from.
Oh, that's so interesting. That is really cool. I like so that's something I really struggle with like when I write just like random stuff. I always struggle with like naming. And so I'm so
Mm-hmm.
curious because I try to avoid like real life people as much as possible because I worry that I'll start to think about the real life person and it'll influence my character's personality. But the
Yeah,
fact that you named it's like
yeah.
your sister, I think that's like we're
Well, it
so
was
sweet.
separate enough. It was, because it's not her name. And I
Right.
don't call my sister KB, even though those are her initials. So it was like, it was separate enough. But I do the same thing. I name a lot of my characters like names of people that I know.
Mhm.
And then like either later I have to like switch them out, or like honestly, there are like some names in this book that are like very similar to names of real people.
Mhm.
And, I think that some people will read this and like kind of find themselves.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. That's cool. It reminds me of like that disclaimer in the beginning of all books where it's like any
Oh yeah.
resemblance to living people is coincidence.
Yeah, yeah,
So when you put these
coincidence.
books, you're like, don't text
Wink,
me.
wink.
It's just a coincidence.
Right, right, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that. I just felt like names are really important.
Hmm.
Like for people of color, it's really important. Like for my Lunar New Year event, we're gonna have to like practice pronouncing them correctly. And
Yeah.
something really interesting is my name in English actually isn't pronounced like chi, like the hard ch.
Hmm.
And it's hard to explain how to actually pronounce it. So I just like live with it, which I guess
Yeah.
is kind of sad. Like I'm just settling.
Yeah.
So I'll always have that kind of like foreignness, I guess, when people speak to me because that's not how my name is pronounced. So I just thought that
Yeah.
names are really important. Like the fact that you chose this and she is your main character. And so I was just really curious about that. Maybe your
Yeah,
subconscious is like, I love my sister.
I do love my sister, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking about. But it's thank you for sharing what you said about your name. And it's interesting because actually, Kai is not my first name. Kai is my middle name. I have a different first name, which I'm not going to share right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you off record. It's a secret first name. No, there's, I love my first name, but I think that like when I was growing up, it was mispronounced so often that I just started to resent it. And I started feeling like, again, representation, I started to feel like there was something wrong with my name. As opposed to realizing that like people could have worked harder to pronounce my name, especially because I was like a little kid. And, I had teachers who would mispronounce my name, religiously, like forever and ever, even if, I tried to correct them.
Right.
And that's frustrating. It's hard to feel like you are not yourself, like your identity is kind of like being wiped away. So yeah, I think that that's super important. So far, all of the characters that I've written, I give them like Black names, like I give them like complicated names. And, in the books that I'm writing right now, I have a whole scene where my character explains to her teacher how to pronounce her name because it's something that's happening to her too. And I want to show that because that's an experience that we deal with. Right. So
definitely.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Like we talk a lot about like we being my friends and like the circles I'm in, which are mostly like Asian people and people of color who have complicated quote unquote names. And so we have like, we call them Starbucks names because at Starbucks they ask for your name. And so my Starbucks name is like Alex, which is like, because you can very clearly hear like the syllables are very clearly enunciated and like sharp enough. So like I would totally name my dog Alex so you can like yell it across the field and then the dog would know. Versus like a name like Sam sounds like jam or ham. But Alex, I'm like, okay, oh, that's my Starbucks. And so that's like my Starbucks, my white people name. Because like when they say chai, or they'll even pronounce it like chai. And I'm like, okay, but where's the A? Like, I know y'all have T on your menu. That is not right.
You know what? That's so funny because I switched over to Kai and I'm like, all right, I'm going to give you all this simple name. And Kai still gets mispronounced so often.
Really?
So it's kind of just like, I get K a lot or Kia. I get Kia a lot, more than I would expect. So yeah, I don't know. I guess we can't win. But my goal is just like to become well known enough that people will know how to pronounce my name.
That is so cool. Yeah, like
other people can correct other people for me, and I won't have to be involved in saying like, no, it's actually Kai.
Like it's not K, not Kia, not the car brand. Thank you. Those are switched.
A before I. Yes.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I think it's something that not a lot of people talk about, and for people who have uncommon names, you are important, and your name should be pronounced as it is. So important. This is not really a good segue either. I'm not very good at this, but I'm just like,
you're great at this.
This project for me is so self-indulgent because I like write for fun. And I think it's important for people who come from marginalized communities to share their voices. And so I'm like just really excited about being here. But this question has to do also with like the genre that you've chosen. And so you mentioned that you gravitate towards writing like realistic fiction. And so how or why did you end up writing a coming of age story?
I love coming of age stories. I just think it's such a rich time of life, like as we're like in adolescence and we're like on the precipice of like kind of being a kid and like kind of not being a kid anymore and just trying to figure out what that means. I just feel like it's such a rich time and there's so much to be said about that time of our lives. And also I think there's something so beautiful about coming of age for Black girls specifically. Like, I think that, I could refer to it instead of beautiful as complicated, I guess, in the sense that like, coming of age looks different for, for boys and for girls, I guess you could say, like, traditionally, like back in the day, you have like this classical literature and there was this idea of like coming of age stories or Bildungsroman, whatever stories. They were usually like about young white boys, right? And they're definitely. Like, we get all of these like Huck Finns and those sorts of things. And you already see that this is different if your character is not a male. It's going to look different. Coming of age looks different inherently for women than men. And then it's again changed by Black folks, right? Because coming of age looks very different for Black folks when we're thinking about, you know, race, when we're thinking about class, when we're thinking about, you know, discrimination, ways that our childhood can't flow. We can't reach these same, like, you know, points of understanding about the world or our place in the world because of some of these other things that are going on.
Right.
So I was just really interested in thinking about, like, what does coming of age look like for a young Black girl? How is it the same? How is it different? And I'm doing both of those things. Like, I'm trying to point out how it's the same. And lots of people have already said, like, reading KB's story feels very universal to them. Like, it feels like it reminds them of their own childhood. And these are not just Black women saying this, right? These are all kinds of people saying to me, you know, I had an older white man leave a comment on one of my social media saying, like, reading this book transported him back to his own childhood. And he felt like it was, you know, very universal and relatable. And that's the idea that, you know, I wanted to kind of show, is that Black girlhood is regular childhood, right? We don't have to think about it so separate. And that was the biggest thing to me, is just wanting to write an unfiltered Black girlhood experience. Just, you know, it's first person, present tense, it's in KB's voice, it's through KB's eyes. Like, there's nothing else but her perspective of the world around her at this really, like, important moment of her life.
Oh, that is so cool. Gosh, I never thought about that, where it's like traditional coming of age stories are very, like, white male dominated. I feel like a lot of writing and, like, literature that we study, like, even in high school, I took AP Lit, and we just read a bunch of, like, if not about white people, it was by white people, and I was like, man, I'm tired of this, because our whole classroom was like was like if not, like, Asian, then they were, like, Latinx or, like, just, like, not white people. And so we were like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
That's the question.
Like, we went into class and we we're like, all right, who's the white man of the week? Like, and then our teacher would laugh because he was a white guy.
Yeah,
I think that's so cool and so important. Like, a lot of stuff about childhood is so universal. Like, you're just a kid. You're just a kid trying to explore the world. And some of these themes, like, about growing up and navigating grief, is, like, also universal. Like, gosh, kids shouldn't have to deal with that, but unfortunately they do. And, you know, all kinds of kids deal with that stuff. So that's really cool. I don't really read a lot of coming of age just because I find them, like, so sad usually. But you know what? I'm ready for this. Like, just hearing you talk about it, I'm so excited. Like, I need this. It's like midterm season, so I need this, like, catharsis.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, I'm, like, gonna close my door and be like, all right, if you hear screaming, like, it's fine. I'm okay.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
So cool. I'm so excited to check out this book. So as we're about to wrap up, and we're talking about your first novel. And so you mentioned that you're currently working on another novel. Like, ooh, is that like a sequel, or are you just writing, like, a new piece entirely?
It's new, it's different. This one is, it's still about a young Black girl, but this one's older. She's 15. And so she's in high school, and it's about, you know, it's rooted in that kind of, like, high school experience. And that one, actually, I just finished up revising. So I am working on a third book now as well, which is about a young Black woman who's more like early 20s and kind of on this journey of, like, figuring out what she wants to do with her life.
Ooh, that's so sick. Whoa, 3 books? Dang, Dr. Harris, you're on a roll. Oh, wow.
I'm trying to be.
You're still writing regularly, even though you have, like university and stuff now? That's, wow. That's
I am. It's a lot, but yeah.
Do you consider, sorry, this is, like, so random, but do you consider writing to be, like, are you still writing for pleasure, or is it, like, a job?
That's such an interesting question, because I've been thinking a lot about this. Like, I've been saying, like, I need to get hobbies that aren't my job, because still when people ask me, like, what my hobbies are, I'm always like, oh, reading and writing. And, you know, now both of those are my jobs. So I love writing though. I still would choose to do it, even if, like, when I go on vacations, I write, and people are like, oh, no working on vacation. And I'm like, I'm going to write when I'm on vacation, because, like, being away, seeing new sites, having new interactions always makes me want to write. I just get that creative itch. And sometimes it's just that I just, I keep a travel journal, and I just like to just journal about, like, what I'm seeing and what I'm experiencing. So I try not to write, like, serious stuff when I'm on vacation, but yeah, I love to read and write, but I'm also, picking up some non-reading.
Ooh, okay. Non-reading hobbies. Like what? Like are you picking up like crocheting or like video games or like what kind of stuff do you do?
I love to hike.
Ooh.
So especially since I've like moved here, I've been really
Mm-hmm.
getting into that. I just love to be outdoors. I'm like trying to like get into hobbies, so we're gonna still see how it goes. I really want to like be into art because I
Mm-hmm.
love it. I'm not super artistic, but I've been trying to like learn how to sketch a little bit. And I really like doing those like adult coloring books.
Oh my gosh, yes. No, I totally agree.
They're very fun and cathartic. My friend brought me one that's actually like, this is probably terrible because I'm a professor here, but it's like filled with curse words. And so
Oh,
it's
those are
like these
great.
beautiful like pictures and they're like so like elegant. And then they just have like random weird like sayings in the middle. And so it's just like this idea of it's just like really funny and ridiculous. And it's cathartic. Like if you're just having like a
Definitely.
long day and you just like color
Just
this
color your
beautiful
beautiful thing.
square word filled picture. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like the F word, but like in cursive, and you're like, oh,
Oh yeah, that's exactly
what
it. And then you just like paint it so beautifully or color it so beautifully. So,
yeah, like in pastels, and then you're like, da 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 da, and it's
yeah,
like literally like
exactly.
it's like viscerally swearing, like, ah, perfect way to wrap up your day. I think I
Absolutely.
got my friend a similar book for like Christmas, like a Secret Santa gift or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I'm like, what an interesting gift, but that is so cool. I love coloring too. Um, I wait, what was I gonna say? We're talking about hobbies. Um, I think I was gonna say that yeah, being in California, there's lots of like cool trails. I definitely recommend
Hmm.
Land's End in San Francisco. That one's fun.
Okay.
Because it's not too like strenuous either. So I know you have like kids because your husband told me. So like yeah, you can definitely like bring them along. Um, there are other ones. I'm not really an outdoorsy person.
Yeah.
But my sister knows. So if you ever need,
Cool.
I could get you a list. But in terms of
Okay.
hobbies, yeah, definitely. I was asking this question because like, you know, work-life balance is important. Um,
Hmm.
and so like if you consider like your hobby, your work, then it's like you don't have
Yeah.
work-life balance. You're constantly working and it's like you don't have time to recharge. So
Yeah.
I think it's really cool. And like I love that you love to write. Like the fact that you write for fun and like when you're not supposed to be is fascinating to me. I'm
Yeah.
trying to get into that mindset myself, like just like finding it as like a way to spark joy in my life again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so cool. Thank you for sharing that.
For sure.
Pretty much the last thing I have, just like, do you have any specific takeaways to share regarding your experience, either about writing or about publishing? I know we went over a lot, so you don't have to like repeat yourself. Just like any big things that you tell people if you have any.
You know, I think the biggest thing is just like if someone is wanting to get into publishing, I'm gonna mostly tell them like learn everything you can about it because like there's so much to know, and you know it can be hard to get all the information that you need. Honestly, I would say especially for writers of color, to like just know what you're supposed to know. But there's a lot of things that you're supposed to know to even like
Yeah,
get close to the door. So,
definitely.
you know, I had to spend a lot of time researching, I hope that like as my career continues, I'm going to work towards like creating more space for writers of color to like get the information they need and to know what they need to know. So that's something that a goal that I have for myself because it was so complicated to like meet the right people and know the right things and say the right things and do the right things. So,
Yeah.
you know, research is super important. Reading and writing are super important. Like you should just really, as much as you can, just be reading and be writing.
Mhm.
Um, and you know, ultimately, I'd say the biggest thing is just like stay true to you. If you do get in a situation where you're able to publish, whether you decided to self-publish or traditionally publish, just try to stay true to the thing that made you want to write in the first place. Um,
Yes. I
yeah,
think that's just generally like genuine good life advice.
yeah,
Yeah,
for
just
sure.
like don't compromise your own identity. This is something I say a lot, just because I do like diversity, equity, inclusion work. Like
Hmm.
as we progress in technology, like airplanes are invented, we have the internet now. We're only going to live in a more diverse world, and so
Right.
learning about that and learning about other people is only going to get more and more important. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, definitely really, really important.
for
And
sure.
so do you have any final words to share, like places to buy the book? Shameless plug.
You can buy the books almost anywhere, which is
Ooh,
blowing my mind. It's all over the
cool.
place.
Mhm.
People have been sending me photos of finding the book in different bookstores, and I love that. So if you follow me on social media, author Kai Harris,
Mhm.
I'm on I'm on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. As
TikTok, yo, I'm opening.
no, don't go look. It's not great. Um, but yeah, author Kai Harris. I love to just hear people reacting to the book, and people have been tagging me and like finding the book in different bookstores, which is really cool. Someone like saw it at the O'Hare Airport in Chicago, which was really exciting to me because like I have family in Chicago. I'm there all the time, and I had
Mhm.
no idea it was going to be like available to buy at an
Yo, that is
airport.
so cool.
Yeah, it just feels really official. So yeah, but you can also check out my website, which is just kaiharriswrites.com.
Mhm.
And on the website, I have all of the buy links and ways that you can get to the book there as
Sweet. I feel like the website would also be a good resource for like keeping a tab on your future works. Well, I guess also for your social
well.
media.
Yeah,
Ooh,
yeah,
well, there's both
both.
coming out.
Yeah, both places. There's tons of stuff on my website. Like you can find all the other stuff that I've published. Like before I wrote this book, I've published short fiction, I've published poetry, I've published
Ooh.
essays, academic stuff. So you can find all of that on my website as well. And yeah, I keep a newsletter. Sometimes I blog. I try to keep people up to date on what I have going on as much as
Nice.
possible.
Very good to know. Thank you for sharing your socials. I think sounds like the website is like your central hub. So definitely people should check that out. I will link that website in our like podcast description just as a
Awesome.
reference because so cool. I think that's pretty much it. I um I know that this is like a podcast episode and I have no idea how they end it, but I'll just say thank you so much for sharing your time with me. We ended up talking for a lot longer than I expected, which is obviously just a good thing. Like I'm super excited
Yeah.
to have you here. I hope you do, because this is my last quarter. I don't know why this is a secret, but not really a secret. I was hired for literally like 1 quarter and I was like, okay, thank you. So I hope you do end up staying in touch with the Office for
Oh
Multicultural
wow.
Learning. They do a lot
Yeah,
of good work, and we are trying to
absolutely.
like engage with not only students but like faculty. Me and one of my colleagues were working on something called like the FAM network. Totally
Mm-hmm.
not sure what the FAM stands for off the top of my head. It's really early. No, it's not early. It's 11. So don't quote me. But it's a network for people like faculty, alumni, basically adults who can act as mentors, like people of color
Mm-hmm.
who can act as mentors for students of color. And so we're trying to launch that just to like get it off the ground and try to get students more connected because
Yeah,
it's important to see yourself in an adult and have that kind of
yeah.
voice, like a trusted adult who looks and sounds like you or understands where you're coming from. So if you're
Oh,
interested,
for sure.
that is
I love
definitely a
that.
thing. We also have other stuff. Definitely just like, I think people will keep in touch just because you're so cool.